basically it's like a malfunctioning gene that tends towards colon cancer and cervical cancer, Lynch syndrome. And my siblings didn't get it, but I got it. And I've known I've had this before they even tested me. Like, I knew I was like my dad, and my dad had colon cancer when he was 45. And then he had prostate cancer when he was 65, something like that. And that my other ancestors that have had this all have had cancer. And I just knew from an early age that I had their gene. Like, I knew. There's some part of me that was like, okay, that's what, it's just my reality. And so my dad's, he goes to a cancer specialist, right, because he gets cancer. He doesn't get a cold. He actually almost never gets colds. He just gets cancer. And so your dad, so this happens. And his geneticist says, well, genetics trumps all. Genetics trumps lifestyle. Does anyone play cards? Trumps means that, like, it's going to take the pile, right? That you really can't control these things. The diet and lifestyle, you can only get so far, but that your genetics are going to trump your lifestyle. So if I'm saying you can change your way you age, I'm saying, well, maybe that's not true. Maybe our leading geneticists don't really know what's going on. Maybe our leading cancer specialists maybe don't really have the full picture either, right? Maybe we all have different pieces of different pictures and they inform our beliefs. And so a lot of changing the way you age is, to some degree, you may have to dig deep into your beliefs and decide what you believe and what you don't believe and start acting in alignment with what you believe. So that is foundational, right? That we start to look, and as we look and as we start to say, okay, I can change the way I age, and you start to hear your friend complain about her arthritis while she's sipping coffee, and some part of you thinks you shouldn't probably be drinking, I mean, on a very fundamental level. Does anyone know what caffeine does to calcium? What's the relationship between caffeine and calcium?
Depletes it.
Yeah, depletes it. What about the relationship between red meat and calcium? To digest red meat, or really animal protein in general, to digest protein in general, it depletes the body of calcium. This is simple. This is like, you can learn this in biology in 10th grade. So if you're thinking, like, the arthritis isn't really a choice, but I'm just going to sip my coffee, and now you're thinking, but that has some relationship to the bones, and even though I don't know that much about arthritis, I kind of know that it has probably something to do with what's going on between bones and joints, or the spaces around bones. You start to put these things together, and you start to think, like, well, if I really believe I can change the way I age, I need to actually start being a stand for the understanding the interconnectivity of my biology and my ecology, right, and what causes what to happen. So a lot of what we're going to talk about this afternoon are going to be the practices that help the channels of the body stay clear and open, that help consciousness activate our cells so that our cells are more optimally functioning and are more interconnected into the whole. So we'll do a lot with practices, about talking about bodily practices. But I also want to talk about is, in yoga we have a teaching called the 4 aims of life. Does anyone know what the 4 aims of life are in yoga philosophy? This is like yoga teachers on the spot. Drum roll, please. Anybody? Come on.
Health, happiness, or any of those?
No, it's a chunk of philosophy. The 4 aims of life. I'll say them and you'll be like, oh!
Say one and then we'll go back.
Yeah, okay, good. Artha. Artha is the first one. Artha, Kama, Dharma, Moksha. No bells? Any bells going on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Phew. Like, otherwise you guys might think I'm pulling this out of nowhere.
What did you say? Artha, Dharma?
Artha, Kama, like Kama Sutra, Dharma, and Moksha. Moksha, M-O-K-S-H-A, Moksha. Now, Artha, anyone on Artha? Anyone getting the hit yet? I know some of you have studied this. Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's also also not fun to be put on the spot. So arta is really, it has to do with like being able to take care of what you need. Shelter, food, the basic necessities. That those are really, you have to do that before you get to kama, and kama is pleasure. You kind of have to have a roof over your head. You have to have, enough money that you can like save for retirement, that your nervous system gets grounded. You have to have enough food to eat to sustain yourself. That's all in arta, and that's an aim. It's like if that's not taken care of, we need to focus on that part first. Kama is it's pleasure. It's like tapping into what's deeply pleasurable. So in the Kama Sutras, it's a lot of those are the like the pleasure seeking sutras. It's really a lot about sensuality first, really, before it's about sexuality. It's like what makes your senses juicy and come alive, like what really taps you into deep pleasure, which is an interesting thing. Like that second, like once you have your stuff taken care of, you don't have like too much stuff that it crowds your life or too little stuff that you're in deep need. Once you have that relationship like checked off, then you can start to experience what's deeply pleasurable. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about these four, and we'll get into the other two in a minute, is there's these threads of women's wisdom that are really gaining a lot of traction right now that basically say like women have lost connection with that which is deeply pleasurable. And it's just like the endless to-do list. Does anyone have that experience? Mm-hmm. Like there's like always something else like pulling on you, and you don't get to spend time doing what's really deeply pleasurable, whether it's taking a bath, or whether, one of the places that I find the deepest pleasure I can experience is in meditation, right? Where there's just time to even cultivate that kind of relationship with the spiritual potentiality to experience that. Other times it's that we're just like rushing through our eating, or we're eating while we're on the go, and we're not taking deep pleasure in food. Or there's these foods that we know we're not supposed to eat, but we eat them anyways, but we feel like we're doing something bad when we're taking in something that's pleasurable. So there's some really weird disconnect, some friction around taking in deep nourishment. So one of the things that we're going to explore today is really like what is deeply pleasurable, and how is that so important in changing the way you age? Why is pleasure, and I'm not talking about a superficial pleasure, but a deep pleasure essential to shifting how you age? So what are your thoughts on that? Why would those two things be connected?
Less stress. Mm-hmm.
It's like the opposite of stress, right?
Mm-hmm. Makes your cells feel good.
Yeah, so there's something happening cellularly. Yeah.
Which is sort of that bliss, the connecting with the cosmos or the universe, where you're supposed to be, a bliss in your existence.
Yeah, that there's a recognition that bliss is available.
Okay.
It's okay. It's available. If
It's
it's
a way
there,
to soothe yourself too.
self-soothing. So if you get anxious or irritable or depressed, that there's something to look for that can guide you back into, that the pleasure's there as a guide into greater integration or wholeness or optimal health.
It fuels our desire, which fuels our will to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's fueling our desire, it's fueling our will to actually do something
It makes
besides.
life worth living.
Yeah, and that's beautiful, Amy, and that gets into the next aim of life. The next aim of life after kama, is Dharma, which is what the heck are you going to do now that you have what you need, physically, materially, and you get that, this is going to be good, there's goodness here, that you're grounded in that sense. If you experience, even just right now, just see if you can sit in a way and be in your inner body in a way that you experience deep pleasure. And if you're not used to doing this on a regular basis, you might be like, Kate, what are you talking about? But even thinking that, or hearing that there's a potentiality that just in beingness, which is the opposite of doing, which can be stressful, that just in a beingness, there's deep pleasure. And just notice like it's available or it's potentially available. And so once we're acting from that place, it's really different than acting from the to-do list or acting from a not enoughness.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Not enough, that's what I keep thinking. Not enough. You're not enough.
So if we're acting, and that's what really Dharma is about, how do you show up in the world? What do you get done in this lifetime? Right? That's the doing, but it's three. There's an order to this. So it's like if you're acting from not enoughness, how you show up is going to carry the karma, the seeds, right, of that not enoughness. The seeds grow the tree. So the actions that you're doing are going to carry the energetic behind it. Now, to go back into, would you guys, if you have name tags, if they would stick on your shirts, would you just put on your shirts? Because I'd rather call you by name, because you know each other by name, and I just don't know all your names, and then I can see them. Thanks so much. So I'm going to back up and point our awareness to that there's a lot of paradox in who you are. It's not so linear, where it's like we're not necessarily who we think we are. In yoga philosophy, and I would say really in every religious tradition, in every spiritual tradition, there's a basic belief that you who you ultimately are is beyond time and space. Right? And the paradox is like we wake up in a body every morning, and it doesn't really seem like we're beyond time and space because this is going to die. Now, one of the paradoxes of aging is that you could die tomorrow or you could die when you're 100, and no one knows. No one can tell you when you're going to die. And you might live differently if you were going to die in a year versus if you were going to die in 60 years or 80 years. You might live differently, planning for the future, right? Depending on that. But that's another paradox. So we have two major paradoxes here. One is you're beyond time and space, but you have a body that's totally locked into time and space. And another paradox is you have no idea how you're going to die. You have no idea when you're going to die, but you should probably take care of your body as if you were going to last forever. Right? So that's another, and these things, it's like we have to bring all this into reality if we're going to change the way we age. We have to start thinking about things that other people aren't talking to you about, that your doctor's not talking to you about. Right? You have to start thinking in some of these terms. Okay, so now, in the paradox, we have a lot of duality. You are in time and space. Your body's only going to last a certain number of years, maybe 100. We're just going to take an even 100 for the purposes of today's class. How can you thrive in your 80s and 90s is what I'm most interested in. How can you not be a burden to society? How can you live in a body that's open and clear? How can you have your own teeth? That's what we're talking about in terms of my little definition for today's purposes of changing the way we age. Okay. On one hand, you're beyond duality. You're formless. You're absolutely free. You're absolutely bliss, and you're never going to die. And that's first. Like, if we get that, then our nervous system relaxes, and we're able to show up. But we often forget that. And when we're in the body, this other side of that paradox is that we're in the world of form. We're in our body. Now, in the body, in the world of the body, there's duality. There's opposites. Everything, more or less, works like a toggle switch. And I'm absolutely simplifying things here so that we can understand some concepts. But if we start to understand that it's a toggle switch, and you know with the toggle switch, there's no middle? That's the kind of toggle switch I'm talking about. It's either going one way or it's going the other way, but it doesn't stop in the middle. The nervous system works this toggle switch. And either you're in an easeful relationship to life, or you're in a stressful situation. You're in a stressful relationship to life. If you're in an easeful situation, an easeful perspective, an easeful relationship to life, there's a different biochemistry running than if you're in a stressful perspective of your own life. And even for people, like even my mom, who'd say I wouldn't say that she orients herself as being stressed out at all, but her nervous system hasn't relaxed. She hasn't done the practices that enable the nervous